Hello and welcome to Commonplace Expertise, a podcast about expertise in the real world and the people who have them. With me today is Dr. Lia DiBello and Neil Sahota. Dr. Lia DiBello is the Chief Science Officer of ACSILabs Incorporated, which makes the FutureView Platform. I last talked to Lia about her groundbreaking work explicating the mental model of business expertise. And in fact, I actually created this podcast to interview her. And she's back today to talk about her use of AI and to give a perspective that I think not many people seem to have about AI as we're going through this hype cycle. With her is Neil Sahota, who is the CEO of ACSILabs. Neil was part of the original IBM Watson team that won the Jeopardy challenge. After that challenge, he was, amongst other things, the person responsible for IBM's Watson ecosystem strategy and an IBM Master Inventor, which I'm told is a designation for IBM employees who have made outstanding contributions to the IP creation process at IBM. Since leaving Big Blue, Neil has been artificial intelligence advisor to the United Nations. He published a book about AI in 2019 and started the UN's AI for Good initiative, which is currently hosted under the International Telecommunications Union. Hi, Lia. Hi, Neil. Good to have you.
Good to be back.
Great to be here, Cedric.
Cool. We are here to talk about AI, and this is a conversation initiated by both of you, actually. And we want to, you reached out to me and you said that you wanted to bring a human-first, expertise-oriented perspective to the topic. Not just talking about AI for AI's sake, not just, talking about all the usual talking points. We're currently in the midst of an AI hype cycle, and there's a lot of narratives out there. And I agree with you after talking to you that I think your perspective is unique and deserves to be heard. So, to kick this off, Lia, can you talk a little about your experiences using AI over the past couple of years? You're not new to this. You've been using AI in your work for quite a bit.
Well, our research originally way back, and you probably know this from reading all our papers, was motivated by the influx of technology. And our perspective, my perspective as a scientist and as an academic, was that what we're really doing all the time with people using technology to do their work and expertise in general is looking how what we call the user tool activity system is constantly being changed by technology, including AI. And FutureView is just a platform that accelerates people's appropriation of new tools to amplify their own expertise and move them up the expertise scale. So since I think you're familiar with the 5 stages that, for lack of a better word, Dreyfus uses, right, from novice to expert. So it's an epistemological model that assumes that you can't jump to expertise. You have to go through a developmental cycle cognitively. It's kind of a hard-boiled assumption of expertise research. And what we do is we push people faster through that. And AI is a way of creating an unfolding future that adapts as they become better. So the environment becomes more complicated. It delivers challenges to them that are more appropriate as they move up the expertise scale. And then FutureView itself is the learning model is something that tracks all of your micro behaviors and gives you instant feedback on where you are in terms of how far or close you are to an expert. So the AI is not used to do anything for people. It doesn't make their decisions. It pulls them forward and makes interesting unfolding futures for them to rise up to the challenge. So it's not a scripted scenario. It's a more dynamic situation. And AI is being used to adapt to the person's changing cognition. And, it's pretty exciting what we're doing now with like the military and with mining and so on. And FutureView's other recent innovation is something we call the node editor, so that people who are world-class experts can make their own scenarios, and the learning model is baked into the DNA of the platform, so they don't have to be experts in that. They only have to... Go ahead.
When you say FutureView, right? Perhaps we should walk through listeners who aren't watching this on YouTube. They're just listening to this in their podcast, right? They're driving or whatever. What is FutureView? What does FutureView look like or feel like? And, I'm happy to hear from either of you because you both have experiences with FutureView.
Well, I'll start and Neil will jump in when I'm wrong. The platform is, been under development for more than 20 years. And at first it was a suite of technologies, one of which is the profiler that you're aware of, which is basically a way of giving feedback on using intelligent agents. Like in the old days, they were physical models that were intelligent, that could track people's behavior and show in a graphical way where their decisions were on an expertise scale. And we discovered early on that that's all people really need, is compressed time and microfeedback to start to reorganize their cognitive models. Actually, because of Jim Spohr at IBM in about 2007, he said, theoretically, given the processes, the neurophysiological processes that you're manipulating in the brain, by doing this, putting it in a virtual world should work. Particularly if the virtual world is designed to be immersive. Because we know that other research on the brain is that, some people believe we live in a simulation all the time. We just create it with our own heads, right? I mean, I'm probably evidence for that. I'm kind of in my own world. So the idea is that if we can make a compelling virtual world that draws people in, like a great movie, so they forget everything else, it's much easier to manipulate the adaptive unconscious and focus it in and we know that people learn faster that way. And so we tried it. And to be honest with you, I was very skeptical. I said, I think that tactical stimulation might be important, touching stuff. But it turned out I was wrong. We did some studies on EEGs, and we found out that there's whole brain, if the world is designed right, there's whole brain activation. The brain, the motor cortex works when people's avatars are walking. And it really goes crazy when you run into another person, even if it's not a real person in the simulation. So we decided to really hone that. So for about 10 years, we've been designing virtual environments. Not all of them are 3D. We use some 2D stuff. Anything that feels real and immersive to a person in that domain. So for medical diagnosis, we have a 2D system that looks like all the stuff that people look at, right? It looks like their workplace. And but for something like mining or for military operations, obviously it has to be 3D, right? Because that's what they do. So we create... Go ahead.
Sorry, Lia. When you say 3D, you mean you're playing like a game on a computer screen, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be a VR headset where you're, immersed inside a metaverse. Right. Or, open close quotes.
So Cedric, sorry to interrupt. I think you're talking about something that's very important. We talk about metaverse. It doesn't mean a virtual reality system. Metaverse is just a digital representation of the world. So it could be something on your laptop screen, on your phone. It could be 2D, 3D, that kind of stuff. It's just a virtual representation of the world. And we know that at this point, we can create a digital twin of any object, location, or person. So it feels more real and more visceral as a result. I just want to call that for everybody. That it's not like you're playing a game or something like that. You're in your office, or you're at your campus, or you're at a mine site, or you're at a landing location. Whatever it might be, it's that representation. That's why Lee talks about the visceral experience. it feels real because when you look at there, it's like it looks like the real place you're actually at.
Right.
Everything you do is a
Wow.
manifestation, visual manifestation of that real place.
Right. So we actually have a very large open pit mine for one of our mining customers, and their general managers actually go in there in a multiplayer, activities, and they actually have to bring the mine back to profitability through a series of decisions and meetings and walking around. And instead of talking about it in a conference room, they're in a mine, checking on the crusher, evaluating mineral finding discovery technologies. They're walking around. Because it's so big, they can also teleport. They're driving around, but it's
nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean,
It is, but sorry to interrupt. It's one of those things again. As you make decisions, you can actually see the outcomes, and
yeah,
I hate to say it this way, as human beings, we think about something, we're focused on the direct outcome we're thinking about. We're not thinking about the other ancillary impacts. That's the power that we have with FutureView. It's not just like I make this decision, does it do X or Y for me? It's like there's literally 1,000 different things that could happen from that. There's ripple effects that you can actually see.
Yeah.
So some of these things like, cannibalization of revenue, safety concerns that get increased or decreased, competency level of your executives or manager. So you see a lot of the things stack up on top of just one decision, just like you see in the real world. And that's what a lot of us actually struggle with is we're focused on a very narrow thing. We don't think about, again, those ancillary impacts. Here's a way to essentially scenario plan and see through thousands, maybe millions of different possible outcomes.
And it rolls up vertically to a financial outcome. Right. So they can go and they can pull up a dashboard and they can say, okay, the accumulated effect of all my behaviors has been I have not moved the needle on the value of the mining asset. And we don't really understand why. There's actually a lot of debate among the cognitive science community about why this works so well. But we do know that you just have to do it a couple of times for that needle to move. People start modifying their behavior to add a financial value. And what we're seeing with Marine officers is that just within a couple of hours, they're having much greater mission success than they, and these are people who have graduated from officer training school, but they're, the first time they go through it, they make a lot of pretty normal mistakes, but normal mistakes for a junior officer can be really bad. And we put them in a leadership role that they wouldn't be in because of their status, right? They're not yet, they're not colonels or anything, but we put them in a situation as if they were in charge, and it pulls them up to not only understand what is involved in the complex operation of a successful mission that represents the United States well, but also as more junior officers, when they go back to work, they see how their behavior affects the big picture. They get a much better picture. And again, you've talked to some of my colleagues, Cedric. I have a theory about what's going on with the brain and how things are being reorganized, but other people, have different theories, but we do know that that's what happens. And it happens very fast.
Right. Could you talk a little about AI and how AI plays into this? So now that we've set the stage on the kind of training modality that you are using, because people are not aware that, if you do typical corporate training is sitting in front of a PowerPoint presentation. And here, this is something very different. This is you are playing through a corporate scenario or a business scenario, right? And yeah, there's something magical that happens in the brain. But what was FutureView like before integrating an AI solution versus now, which has AI?
Well, we always had some form of AI. We used what we called a pattern generator, that we put some randomness in, and we gave it some guardrails so that it would create a random unfolding future in terms of all the events, but the curve or the outer boundaries of the events was there. So, for example, when we worked with Swiss Re, we created an unfolding future of a market decline, something like the subprime mortgage crisis. But each time they played through the game, the 800,000 RFQs were different. And we used AI to shuffle the deck to create a different unfolding future with the same non-negotiable goal, which is to discover the path to profitability in there somewhere. And the reason we do that is because people memorize stuff. They memorize games. And we wanted to make it so that they had a first principles understanding. And we used AI to basically create an ever-changing world. We still do that, but what's different now is the AI can sense what they're doing and increase the complexity commensurate with them moving up the expertise ladder.
So if I can just maybe, I'll put in air quotes, quantify that, right? It's very important to understand you can't memorize your way. It's not like a fixed game, right? You try different things, you learn the right answer, and you go through. You can't do that. I liken this to basketball. How do you become the best basketball player in the world, right? So LeBron James want to be the best basketball player ever. So the best way to learn and practice is, you do some things, you play against people that are better than you, right? And you keep doing that. But at some point, and LeBron faced this, he became the best basketball player. He plateaued, right? So there's no one else you can learn from. So what do? You decline because other people are still learning against you. What we've really done with FutureView and trying to leverage AI here is there's always a better basketball player than you are. So you've always got this better level ahead of you, so you're always learning and growing. And that's the power. And you can factor in socioeconomic information, geopolitical information, all these things that will, especially the environmental impacts will influence your decision making, and try and factor that in so that every time the scenario is a little bit different. So as you get better, you can make the challenge a little bit harder, so they're always learning and growing.
It also senses, like for example, for the military officers, there's actually 6 categories of cognitive capability that a seasoned officer is in command of. It's like the 3-legged stool, but it has 6 legs, right? So it also creates a heat map of where you have a persistent struggle, and that's what the behavior tracking and scoring does. And the AI can sense that you're weak in things like rules of engagement or servant leadership, and it can up the ante and give you more challenges in that area and pull you up.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the idea.
You see, the reason we spend so much time talking about AI in FutureView is because I think we're laying painting a picture of a good use of AI. This is a coherent picture. It makes sense given the theory behind the FutureView platform. And that sets the stage for the next phase of our discussion, which is AI more generally in the industry. Neil, you've seen a lot of AI applications in your time with IBM and then with the UN. Could you talk a little about some of the good applications of AI? And it could be any kind of AI, because you've been doing this way before the current generative AI phase, hype cycle, or whatever you want to call it. What are one or two good stories that are of good uses of AI that are coherent, and achieve good outcomes that you've seen in your long time with this technology?
This is interesting. It's a great question, because there's a lot of good uses, beyond the hype that we always hear. One of the things we actually did with the UN, so one of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, is zero hunger. So could we actually, feed the world? I mean, the basic answer.
What is Neil, what is an SDG again?
Sorry, Sustainable Development Goal.
Yeah.
So for Cedric, for your audience, if you want to learn more, please Google United Nations Sustainable Development Goals or UN SDG. You'll see the list of 17. I won't bore everyone with it.
Yeah. We need a little
But
bubble.
but one of the first ones you'll see is zero hunger. And so, food production, food security, very critical things. And look, we know we can grow a lot of food. Like, I hate to say this, in the United States, we throw away 40% of the food we actually grow. It never sees the grocery store. This color, this shape, and those kinds of things. But we're also looking at tools and solutions that will help, people around the world. Because one thing I've learned is local problems have global solutions. And so you talk about a good use of AI that's realistic, recognizing the limitations that not the whole world has access to the internet. 2.6 billion people actually don't have access to the internet. And not having necessarily like IoT sensors and high-speed internet. What can we do about that? Working with farmers in like Bangladesh and Malawi, we created a very simple solution, very simple information, just using near field connection, that kind of stuff, Bluetooth connection, topsoil analysis, all these kinds of things, the database of different kinds of seeds, trying to figure out how we can optimize crop yields. And what we've basically been able to do was improve crop yields by about 30% using about 10-50% less topsoil resources, about 3% less water, find the right mix of seeds to use, balancing out cash crops versus nutritional crops so that the local community has enough food to sustain themselves, but also enough to go and sell, generate some money, bring the community, and then use that to hire people, build hospitals, schools, those types of things. So what I think we really realized is there's some simple use of AI and to a degree digital farms, not requiring a lot of infrastructure, that even some of the most underserved areas in the world can actually improve food production, feed the local community, and bring more money into that community.
Could you tell another story? That's really good. I really like that story.
All right, I will shift to healthcare. I know we were talking all about education, so I'll shift to healthcare. But you look at a place like, Africa, where if my memory serves me correctly, I think there's about one doctor per 2,000 people. And the average person lives about, I think it's 70 kilometers away from like a health clinic or a hospital. So it's basic healthcare is not that easily accessible. And so what do you do about that? And so we were thinking about that again, thinking about the infrastructure limitations. Smart devices are very prevalent in the whole area. So as long as you keep a device charged, we help create a little self-contained AI system so that if someone like falls, gets injured, or falls with an illness, you can turn anybody in the local area into a healthcare assistant. And so the AI, the person's looking at them, the AI is prompting some questions, you can use the camera, look at some things, but to help that person actually diagnose what's going on, and then hopefully apply some basic treatment. But if it's more serious, then say like we got to call like a helicopter, get this person to a more full service type of healthcare, quality care service place. So you basically have turned some of the most remote rural areas and uplifted them to the level of more advanced healthcare.
Mm. So, the common sort of thing between FutureView and the story around crop yields and the story around healthcare, right, is that these are AI adapted for very real challenges, very real world constraints. Or in the case of FutureView, it's more like it's a virtual world, but it's like there's a coherent theory of training and expertise that the AI serves, right? Now to sort of shift gears a little, right? What are some of the ways that these solutions that you describe are very different from the kind of AI solutions or workflows that at least I hear about in mainstream media that gets the most attention today, right? What are some of the ways that organizations don't get or are doing badly when thinking about applying AI? And this is a question for both of you.
Maybe I could jump in first, Leah, and maybe set the table, let you close it out. I think one of the biggest challenges organizations have is, look, AI is the third generation of computing. First generation was calculation. Second generation, what we're most used to is software programs, right? It's following a set of instructions. I think that's what a lot of organizations are looking for. Like, I want to buy a software package, install it, my people use it, and we're good. The problem is that's not really how AI works. AI needs some level of training. It's got whole new capabilities. It needs to understand your data, your models, the way you do business. So there's very few off-the-shelf like software products you can buy for AI. And that's where I've seen a lot of organizations actually struggle in trying to reap value from artificial intelligence. Because they're still thinking like, I'm buying a software package. That's actually now not how that actually works. So what you really got to do is think about, okay, what's the problem I'm trying to solve? How do I teach it the way I do business? All these things. And that's a very different model. It's not an IT project. You don't have requirements and hand it off to people to design and build and test. This is about essentially AI is you have a high energy intern, Cedric. Right? That intern's willing to learn and do whatever you want, but you got to go and teach it how to do some of the stuff you want it to do. And I think that's a big mindset shift for people. And that's what we've seen at ACSI is that they're like, oh, I thought the AI just knew everything or could do everything, and it doesn't. It's got to learn the way you do business. Because you think about your competitors, they do things a little bit differently, right? And that's one of the key things. It's the same thing with learning, solving complex problems, cloning expertise. It's a little bit different for every organization. But again, we still teach using 19th century techniques. There's a better way of doing this. We got to teach it like this is our business goals. This is the way we normally do things. Maybe there's some room for improvement. I'll figure that out. But this is our outcomes and goals we seek. And that's what you want to do. Same thing, the high energy intern, you got to teach those things to the AI. Sure, from high energy intern to fully productive employee.
Yeah. I see that the best use of AI in workplaces is when you have people who really have a good intuitive understanding of the mission and vision of the company, and they can use, like our developers, they use AI. They use it to write code, but they have a non-negotiable mission of instantiating advanced cognitive science in our platform. If the AI does not do it, then they edit what it does, they guide it, they amplify their own use of time it's like giving each development person on the dev team an intern of his own. But the ultimate expertise is theirs in terms of knowing what's right, knowing if it's doing what we need it to do, if it's conforming to our architectural goals, and kind of moving it around, but getting things done faster. So we at ACSILabs all use AI, but we don't. We use it to amplify our own expertise. It's kind of like an add-on. It's like using Siri or Google to look stuff up. We might say, I think this paragraph is awkward. Could you give me a couple ideas? But we start with our paragraph. It's the same with the dev team. They may start with an idea of how to write the code to do something complicated, but they might get some input from AI. What I see that's wrong is that companies think they can replace people with AI. I think Amazon is doing that. I think it's a big mistake. You're losing all of this cultural wisdom that you've invested a lot of money in about the purpose of the company and why people buy from it. And, people in the company have understood that, and that's determined their activities. And replacing them, you just have nothing but interns, and not what you've invested in, which is to create expertise. My newest hobby is watching how experts use AI. It's fascinating. Because they make, maybe you're familiar with Gary Klein's and Robert Hoffman's idea of AIQ, that there are actually developmental stages of using AI well. I mean, watching that, especially in mining, where some mines are being run from thousands and thousands of miles away by people, using mimics, and sometimes not very high fidelity mimics, and how they interpret what the AI is telling them about what's happening, and knowing when it's hallucinating, when it's wrong, and just understanding something about its limitations based on their expertise to get a good result.
Could you talk more, give a concrete example of what does it look like when an expert is using an AI in a mining context?
Well, I'm not going to mention the company, but there's a company that's got open pit mines in kind of terrible places, not places where human beings want to be. And sometimes this multi-ton truck full of stuff will stop all of a sudden and say that it's run across a school bus with a bunch of kids getting out. We know that's not happening in the bottom of an open pit mine. So, a junior person would freak out and say, the truck is stopped, I don't know why. And a more experienced person who's worked in that part of the world will say, that's a troop of kangaroos. Let's just wait for them to pass. They're just hopping through, And the system doesn't know what a big thing with lots of little things jumping around it would be, so it uses a school bus with kids. And, that's a common, they understand what kind of hallucination it would have and what it really means based on their experience in the environment. And they also could decide better what to do about it. And because they basically understand how it thinks, but they also understand what really could happen in that situation. And they don't let it run things.
So that's really interesting. What you're basically saying is that you're using AI as an extension of human expertise. Mm-hmm. But the way to sort of achieve this kind of human-computer symbiosis is you need to make sure that the experts have a good mental model of the AI. Right. Because, they're going to use the AI, and they need to be able to predict how the AI is going to respond to things, right? Right. What have you seen? This seems like something that we don't talk enough about. What have you seen are some good design practices to help experts better sort of get understand the AI or get inside the head of the AI, to sort of misuse this analogy?
Well, I think also medical diagnosis. There's a lot more, and Neil knows a lot more about this than I do. Imaging technology, and that's AI assisted, like for radiology, so that the AI can see things at a minute level that a human eye would miss, but the human can go back and verify what the AI thinks is going on, like micro evidence of cancer, for example. Currently, cancer can be diagnosed so early now with imaging technology that about 30% of breast cancers are actually something that would not really be a problem for 9 years. But the AI will find it. It's actually pre-cancer. So 10 years ago, those things would never be found at all, and now it's 30% of the findings. You still need a radiologist to sort of put it all in perspective and say, yes, the AI thinks that you've got at least pre-cancer, but we know from being experts and talking to oncologists that this may never develop into anything, and you have lots of choices.
To kind of frame this, what Lia is talking about is what we call in the industry hybrid intelligence. This is not about AI replacing people. It's not about like AI replacing radiologists, right? The honest truth is AI is not going to take most jobs. We've seen that. But the person using AI will take those jobs. And so we talk about hybrid intelligence. Look, we know there's some things that AI does better than human beings. The ability to process lots of data, analyze, find some of those hidden insights. But people do a lot better at AI in some things like, things that require intuition, creativity, first kind of situations. And so we talk about the future of work being hybrid intelligence, but we're really saying this is about complementing human capabilities with AI abilities. So it's about people using the machine, not the machine replacing people. And so we talk about like healthcare and like radiology. Like the AI can look at an X-ray, an MRI, a sonogram, and see a bunch of stuff. They can look for over 200 findings. But all it's really doing is flagging it. It's flagging it for some human to say, like, I see something over here. I might think this is this. Let's take a look at that. And it's really the human looking at it and making the decision. So we're not taking the human out of the equation here. And the ultimate goal is that the human and the machine working together is more accurate than just the human working on it or the machine working on it. And Cedric, the best way I could frame this is, I feel like this is getting an outdated example now because fewer people are playing chess, right? You want to play chess against an AI system, I'm sure most people are already rolling their eyes. Your odds of winning are 1 out of 1,000,000, right?
Yeah.
Those AI systems are really well trained. What we've seen is the human paired up with an AI system playing chess against an AI system wins 9 out of 10 times.
Right.
That's a really good example.
Yeah, it's called hybrid intelligence. It's the combination. We're taking the strengths of people and machine together, and we can do a lot better than just the person or the machine by themselves.
Right. So and I think the fear is that corporations don't recognize that. And new people coming in who are learning like radiology don't recognize that there is still an expertise curve that they have to, an expertise journey they have to go on. They can't just use the AI to do their work for them. They're not going to get a good result.
So I have a bunch of follow-up questions here, but let me put on the devil's advocate cap for a bit, right? And push you on this, right? How are you so confident that AI and human will do better than AI replacing human? There is real, if you look at mainstream media, I think just a couple of weeks ago, months ago, I was watching, Jon Stewart, right? And he had this bit on AI where he sort of interviewed, or like he cut clips from this interview with this person who said, oh yeah, I fired like half my staff, I replaced it with AI. And he's like, that's terrible. Like, that's like, there's real angst in what do you call it? In the air that we breathe right now, in the media environment that we're in, there's real fear of AI replacing jobs, right? Because we sort of see AI capabilities increasing every couple of months. I remember going on Reddit after OpenAI released their video generation model, and it was a subreddit for VFX artists, and they were all sort of like in pure existential angst. Are we going to lose our jobs? Do we have to pick up something else? So how do you know that the future is human and AI, given that the mainstream take is that AI is improving every couple of months and it's coming for our jobs?
So let me jump in first here, and then Lia, we'll add more important commentary for me. But the honest truth is, like, we've worked with dozens of organizations. They went in, we're going to use AI to reduce headcount, and 99% of them did not reduce headcount. What they ultimately found was, great, AI is great at these very repetitive, standardized tasks. AI can only do what we teach it, right? So anything with a lot of variation is tough. you're taking a lot of the admin and grunt work off our plates. And what they found was, yeah, AI can help me with insurance claims. AI can help me respond to a legal complaint. But there's this whole other universe of work I've never been able to really throw a lot of resources before at. That's not where I'm pushing people into. So you take like law, for example. You're an associate lawyer with 3 years of experience. You work for a law firm, defense. Somebody sues your client, and so you read the complaint, respond to the complaint, maybe generate a counter complaint, you start generating deposition questions, you start doing some legal research. An experienced associate lawyer of 3 years, you're talking about 8 to 12 hours of work, right? Well, now we have AI systems that can do some of this work. They can do it in 2 minutes. You still have the associate lawyer do like a 15, 20-minute review, make sure everything looks all right, any gaps, fix any errors. So is your reaction like, well, do I just fire all these associate lawyers? No, because it's like, well, now I have people with free time that can do the other stuff I could never do, right? They can spend more time talking to the client, figuring out case strategy. They can help with jury selection. I can start teaching them earlier about business development, like rainmaking, as they call it. So it's like I can repurpose these people for more complex value-add work. And that's what's really been happening with a lot of these companies. Like, I never thought I'd have resources to do this. I can expand my book of business, improve client satisfaction, all these things. And that's what's really happening. It's not that, oh, okay, I'm just automating people out of jobs. It's like I can finally do this other set of work I've never been able to address before.
And I think also it's not a new issue, right? 98% of the people in the United States in the 1800s were growing food. They were plowing, they were doing stuff. Now 2% of people in the United States grow all the food for everybody. And they're not out of a job. They just have a different job. And I see the same thing with AI, where people have a different job that's they're not doing busy work anymore. The AI can help them with that or speed it up, and then they can do kind of more innovative, visionary kinds of work. We can own farms instead of being in the fields, watching our machines plow everything. So it still takes imagination to figure out how much food. It's the same with ERP systems. It's the same with automation. And all that started in the 80s. People thought they were going to be out of a job. Now they're happy not to be on an assembly line screwing something in every few minutes, but running an assembly line where robots are doing that. It's a different job.
If I could just build off that idea Leah is sharing, in every industrial revolution we experienced, that was the fear. People will be automated out of jobs. What we've seen is that actually hasn't happened. We know some jobs will go away, but most jobs, the responsibilities morph into something more complex, more value add. And I think AI has triggered the fourth industrial revolution. But again, it's the same thing. It's not like, well, we're going to do all these things we used to do. AI is going to do that, and so there's nothing else to do. No, there's a whole different set of work out there. More complex, more value add. And I think that's what we tend to forget about. Every industrial revolution, they're so worried about. Like the word sabotage came out of the first industrial revolution.
Yes.
Because you had Dutch workers throwing their sabots, their shoes, into the machine so they wouldn't work. But the honest truth is, every industrial revolution, two things always happen. One, you can't stop it. You can't stop the wave of change. Right? And so the people that benefit the most are the ones that recognize that and upskill and get ready to ride that change, and define it. And the people that don't are the ones that get left behind, unfortunately. The second thing is there's always work for people. In fact, if you really think about it, when you ask some of these executives of these businesses, it's like, there's this whole set over here we've never been able to do before. Can I now actually do that? So while they might be thinking even headcount reduction initially, it rarely works out that way.
You can't shrink to greatness. So, I mean, you can't. I mean, it's so what you can do if you have AI is you can do more with the same
Yes.
number of people.
So moving back to something that you said earlier, which I think is a more interesting question. We have to talk about the angst, but in truth, I believe what you're saying. And I know I've read enough history to know that what you're saying is most likely going to come true. Anybody who has read enough history would probably reason that, yeah, this will probably play out sort of in the sort of same way that the previous industrial revolutions have played out. But to sort of if I buy what you're saying, and I do, by the way, buy that AI plus expertise beats AI alone or human alone, right? Then the sort of more puzzling or more interesting question is like, if you're junior and you don't yet have expertise, can you build expertise given that now you're living in a world where these experts plus AI are outperforming everyone? That's like the first sort of question. Then the second question is like, what are some training methodologies? Because we're talking about a different kind of work where you are not only doing the work, but you're doing the work with an AI, which is a different skill in itself, to sort of go back to Gary Klein's sort of AI IQ, right? Do you have any thoughts around how to improve or approach the training problem that is embedded in your description of this future?
FutureView. I think,
Leah, go first. Go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're really doing, particularly with mining, is we're teaching, or we're having people develop expertise in working in a much more complicated digital mine. They think they're becoming better servant leaders and relying on their subordinates, the subject matter experts that work for them. These are all general managers who run big assets, and they could have 6,000 people working for them, and some of them are geologists and metallurgists and stuff. And what they're learning is to be better leaders to get more out of their experts. But they're also doing the same thing. We're kind of sneaking this up on them with AI. It's in the scenarios where, when do you listen to it? When do you not listen to it? How do you integrate that into your thinking? So I'm getting an echo. Okay. Anyway, maybe I should plug in. But the point is that whenever we create expertise in a job, we have to represent what's there. And if AI is part of the new working environment, that's just another part of it that they have to become symbiotic with. And before, it was stuff like, big machines that did a lot of the work that human beings used to do, and now it's AI, but it's still the same problem. You still have to accomplish your goal of rationalizing the existence of the enterprise. It's got to produce more value than the resources it uses, and you still have to figure that out. So I think if people need to be trained in AI, put it in there as one of the things they have to master and appropriate to do a good job.
No, 100%. Look, you roll back to the mid-1990s, right? You talk about people using email for work. They're like, are you crazy? It's not efficient. Just pick up the phone, talk to somebody, right? That's the thought in 1995. Well, here we are in 2024. You talk to people like, well, you should just call up somebody. They're like, are you crazy? Email them or just instant message them, right? And I think it's a change. Everything we experience is change. We always talk about what's the constants in the universe, right? It's death, taxes, and change. Email has replaced communication. We still have face-to-face, all these things, but we have different tools, and that's the thing, is we have to learn how to take advantage of these tools. AI is one of them. Metaverse is one of them. Facebook, social media has changed marketing. You talk about like complex problem solving, calling expertise, FutureView. We have all these things to do something better. Like, we thought for the longest time you could never teach someone creative thinking. In our work with FutureView, is like, oh wow, we've actually been able to teach people creative thinking.
Wait, really? Go on. Say more.
Well, if you give them a goal that can't be accomplished any other way except by being creative, they get creative.
Okay. Wait, this is in military or mining context?
Any of it, yeah.
Any of it, yeah.
Yeah. The only reason that we got the project with the military is because there was a recognition in the Future Force initiative at the government level that soldiers have to be more cognitively agile, more creative. So all of our scenarios require uncertainty. It's not skill and drill. It's this happened, this happened, this happened. I played this, by the way, I tested this simulation today. I got a headache. It was really hard. And I kept getting, feedback that I had made a catastrophic decision and that I was going to have to face the consequences later. And I'm like, oh man, what did I do now? Like I ran over a sheep, things like that, a villager's sheep. I mean, all these like small things that you think of as not being particularly, but the ripple effect of that is an international incident, So just having to think through that stuff, like your commanding officer is not there. You have to think, you have to make a decision, you have to assess the situation, and you have to do it in 3 seconds. Boom, 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 and, the good news is people really like it. They find it very, very challenging, but they also find it very absorbing. And it's complicated enough that they want to do it again and see if they get a better result. And then it's a different unfolding future. And they have to really understand at a deep level how to be creative in very uncertain situations. And I don't know that much about it, but one of the things that has always bothered me about military training is that it doesn't take into consideration that the enemy learns. That you can't train people for the last war that you were in. So what we're doing with FutureView is basically saying, you don't know what's going to happen, but you know that you have to comply with the rules of engagement. You have to respect human life. You have to, deal with people who may not be nice, and yet you have to preserve human life unless you have a reason not to. And that you're representing the United States overseas in terrible places, and you got to figure it out. So I think that we're definitely getting a lot of creativity, and the fact that because of AI we can make the simulations very open-ended, so that there's not a script. You can't memorize the answers. You don't know what's going to happen each time. We are getting lots of people who are really getting very good at figuring stuff out.
Yeah, I'll air quote geek out. I'm not a big Star Wars fan. I know something about Star Wars, but I like to use the third episode 3 movie on risk management, but there was a great line in there about the bad guys, the Siths, how are they able to do all these things? And there was a quote by them saying like, the good guys, the Jedi, kept training to fight the same last war, not realizing that there's a different way to fight the war, right? The Sith didn't win that, so why would they do the same thing again, right? And so they found a different way to try and win that the Jedi never considered. And I think that's one of the key things that we always focus on, right? We know what we know things that work. We're trained that if there's a problem or an issue, we try and address that, continuous improvement. We're not sitting there thinking about, is there a better way of doing something, right? We're not trained to think about if something is not broken, but is there a better way of doing it, right? We have new processes, new technology, new tools that we can do something. We can change the way we do the work. That's the difference. You talk about people that are innovators, disruptors. Those are people trying to solve problems that are not actually problems, trying to fix something that's not broken, taking advantage of the latest technology and tools. Right? We think that's some sort of specialized skill set. It's not. Right? We've shown that anyone can actually do this. You can actually teach anyone to do that through FutureView. The honest truth is, there's always a better way of doing something, whether it's working or not working. But we're so ingrained on the problem area that we create a blind spot for ourselves.
And remember, we haven't evolved since we were in caves 200,000 years ago. And yet we're going to space. We all are very creative and adaptive. We just need to have it be something that we need to do to feel like we can survive. And in a way, that's kind of what FutureView does. It gives the brain doesn't like to be wrong. It will always innovate if it doesn't feel that it's adapting to what's required. And if you make innovation something that's required, that's what it does.
Yeah. One thing that I'm struggling with the examples that you're giving and the stories, like FutureView is remarkable, right? And but when you describe it, of course you would use AI. Of course you would use AI to achieve those goals, right? It's like you're presenting it, this multi-decade trial and error process. So it's very clear to you, like, how to put the AI in and how it interacts with the human brains, the human cognition of the players or the agents that are interacting with the system, right? Because you're building a social technical system. But for companies who don't have this experience, right, we're seeing people pay for ChatGPT subscriptions. And they say, for their employees, and say, go knock yourself out, right? That doesn't strike me as a particularly intelligent way of, augmenting and changing the way that you're approaching your work. That's very different from the kind of AI use that we're talking about with FutureView. So, like, how do companies get more of that? Like, how do they think like the use cases that you've described, Neil, and the application of AI that you've described, Leah, in FutureView? Like, the kind of discourse that I'm getting, sitting outside the domains that you're operating in, which are not very advanced or good at using AI, right? The conversation is just like, oh, go use a chatbot and learn how to prompt it properly, right? And that's it. And I'm not hearing that much sophisticated stuff, at least not on the level of what you're talking about. How do we get there?
It's a challenge, right? Part of it is a cultural mindset challenge, but part of it is just understanding how does work challenge, right? So let me start with the latter part first. I know plenty of companies that have sent people out. They've done like, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever type of training, right? And the executive expectation is we pay for all this training, learn, prompting, this kind of stuff, and they're going to figure out ways to use that on the job, right? The challenge, though, is a lot of those employees, you talk to them, it's like, great, I got this training on how to write good prompts, but no one's telling me where I should use this on the job, right? So this massive disconnect on what's actually going to happen. The executives, the managers, leadership want innovative thinking, but they haven't created the culture of innovative thinking, so that they're trying to figure out how to do that. She's like, I'm waiting to be told where to use this, right? And so you create this weird stalemate type of situation. And that's why you see all these things. People like, well, I spent a couple $1 million on training kind of stuff and we got no benefit out of it, right? So that's one huge issue over here that's totally going on. The other piece of this equation is there's real value that can be unlocked, but you've also got to foster this culture of innovation, experimentation, disruptive thinking, if you want, right? That you want to let people say, like, look, maybe there's a better way of doing this. This process, this mode is not, or this system is not necessarily broken, but there might be a better way now with these tools that we have that we can actually do this. And there's just this inherent resistance because a lot of organizations don't want to take the liability, they don't want to take the negative risk, right? And so despite the fact that, like, I want innovative thinkers, but I don't want to have to invest a lot of money and resources on something that may not pan out or cannibalize my existing revenue. And so there's this huge disconnect on what's actually going on. But this is also, again, where adding, in FutureView, the layer with the metaverse, the ability to experiment and see what actually the outcomes are without risking your business, without risking this level of capital and resource commitment, and see what unfolds is huge, right? Everybody would love to have a POC or a pilot, POC, proof of concept. Here's an opportunity to actually do that.
Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. The training now is very bottom up. I remember when people first started using the internet, they would go to courses where they would learn to use the mouse. But I'm serious. It's very bottom up.
I know.
It's
I know.
reading, writing, arithmetic. So but learning the way the brain works is always in situ. It's kind of like saying, okay, we're going to train Olympic athletes by having them sit in a chair all day and flex their knee, right? No, you would never do that, right? Flex it really, now flex your left knee, and just keep doing that. What you do is you have them practice what they're going to do in the Olympics with all the pressure, with all the equipment, with all the same scoring scheme. That in situ learning always works. So I'll give you an example. We worked with a community college that had an abysmal graduation rate. Just abysmal. People would apply for the free scholarships from the government and they go buy a TV with it. They just weren't getting, the college was very motivated to get butts in seats and not completion rates. The way that the government started incentivizing these colleges was, you're not getting any money for these students unless they finish. And that's when you get your money. So some of these programs are only 4 months, but you get nothing till the student completes. So we did a FutureView exercise with them where we said, you've got to figure out how to get students to complete. And these are all experienced instructors, administrators, all walks of the community college life. And we did an exercise where they had to think of ways to increase not enrollment, but completion. And I think we did, they did this for a few hours, and they ended up with such innovative ideas that the college actually implemented the exact things they came up with in the FutureView exercise, and they doubled the graduation rate within about a semester. They just realized, okay, my job is not to show up and talk at a bunch of kids. My job is to, from my experience, think of ways to make sure they complete. And they knew the students. They figured out what it was that was keeping them from completing, and they came up with innovations. Things like study groups at odd hours for people who had day jobs. Things like that, because they knew what the problems were, why kids weren't getting their homework done, why they weren't getting their assignments done. They may live in a chaotic environment, so they gave them, study spaces that were open all night. Things like that, and the graduation rate doubled.
It strikes me that this problem of how do you get companies to adopt AI, the solutions seem very simple once you say that, once they've worked, right?
Right.
But then coming up with them beforehand, you're like, how do we come up with ways to apply AI? It seems a bit too far-fetched for most companies that I've talked to that I know, right? And it in many ways, it seems like the puzzle goes back to the problem that you face, Lia, at the start of your career with the bus depot, where you're trying to introduce a new technology, and it's not clear how to introduce the new technology. Do you have tips for companies, if they're wanting to change their processes or use AI productively? Do you have any tips for how to adopt that?
Start with the goal. What we did with the New York City Transit was we started with the goal, which is to increase first pass yield on the equipment. And so we designed an exercise where the mechanics had to figure that out. And they realized that even though they've never used a computer before, and this is back in the green screen days when there was no mouse, they realized, well, that all the data are in there, and I am a mechanic, and I do understand it better than anybody. And if there's another team across the room playing the same game, and I don't want them to win, I'm going to figure out how to use the data and use the computer, even though I've never used a computer before except an ATM machine to get cash. And they figured it out.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
basically start with the set some company goal and then let the people working in those jobs figure out how to use AI to achieve
Right.
those
Give
goals.
them AI as one of the tools they have to use. Yeah. Just like we gave the mechanics a computer, like, if you think you're a genius and you can figure this out without a computer, great. But by the way, here it is, and you've got 10 minutes. They got so good at it that we didn't even understand what they were doing. I mean, they were increasing first pass yield in mean distance between failure to be unprecedented. And when they did it with subway cars that should have been retired 10 years before, and they had to extend their lives, we had no idea what they were doing. They were looking at the data and go, oh yeah, we know what to do. And we were like, good, great, do it. We don't even know what you see there. But it was kind of wild. But I've written all about that.
Yep. I've read it.
Yeah.
So this is a question for both of you. How should AI systems designers think about designing affordances, which is a $2 word that means like understanding what the AI system is doing, right? Designing affordances on what is basically a stochastic piece of software, which is another $2 word, meaning that it's probabilistic. You don't really know what the output's gonna be, right? Like, do you have any tips for people who are implementing system designs or AI in workflows to help
Neil question.
the people?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, the first and foremost thing is, do not treat this like an IT project. You don't create a set of requirements and hand off to a tech team. You may have some really smart technologists, but if they don't have a deep enough domain expertise, they can't do it. The honest truth is we don't program AI, we teach it. Right? And so when you want to do an AI project, it has to be a combination of business folks, domain experts, and IT professionals. But you have to start with something we call the ground truth, which are rules on how to make decisions, not decisions themselves. So you kind of have to think about like different scenarios of these things, but you give it the rules, then you give the AI system a lot of data, right? It's going to pour through the data, apply these rules. It's going to try things, learn from the experience. Then you have human teachers essentially test it, help it learn and grow. That's the big difference that people don't get. Neural networks, right? Big difference between machine learning and AI. Machine learning, you give the system the algorithm. AI, it figures the algorithm out on its own. Right? That's why I always hear about some of these things like we're not sure how it came up with the answer, right? Because the way the neural network gets wired, we don't know all the combinations, synapses together. That's why the ground truth is so critical. That's what people tend to forget about. Not to pick on Meta, sorry, Mark Zuckerberg, right? But they've been busted a few times in the United States on real estate advertising, violating some of the fair regulation rules. But Meta's rolled out their AI system, Llama, that kind of stuff. Very good system, to be wrong. But a couple of months ago, they got busted by the United States federal government for redlining, which is essentially you're excluding certain demographics from home listings. You can't do that, right? It's not the first time Facebook got busted for something like this, but the first time for the AI. Took a lot of flack, and so the business people went to the engineers. Is like, why didn't you guys factor in redlining with the AI system? And the engineers are like, what's redlining?
Oh,
it's just like they don't have the right domain expertise, the knowledge to understand what some of these things are. That's one of the biggest challenges we actually face. That's why you need the business people. You need the people that are subject matter experts involved, because you teach AI, you don't program it.
Lia, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Neil is right. I mean, my emphasis has always been getting what's there to be a symbiotic tool for the human user. But I think that we all know that there are good AI systems and ones that are kind of stupid. I think that that Neil's right. We now, just like we've had to be very careful about how we design the technologies that run enterprises, resource planning, cycle-based maintenance systems, those have evolved with use. I think AI is going to have to do the same thing. The people who are experts in how to make them are learning how to make them better as people use them.
So FutureView is a training platform designed to accelerate expertise. And that's the purpose of the system. Do you think it's possible to design AI workflows and AI systems in normal business processes to help them accelerate the expertise of the people using them?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And FutureView, isn't just a training thing. It also, in its early days in particular, it was used to solve problems that companies could not solve. They're problems that needed to be war gamed. And the sort of side effect of that was expertise. The people who went through those exercises, the company came out better, but the people were different. So we realized we're missing an opportunity by not using it to accelerate learning in general. And that is a good moral use of it, actually, because people don't have a lot of options for keeping up with change. But you can solve the problem of testing AI in FutureView, which is a good system, which is not a good system.
Well, I think that's one of the critical things that we forget about, right? We want to be able to upskill people to a higher level, which we know can do. We accelerate the process. There's a better way of especially wiring your brain. There's a better way of, being immersive and looking at complex problems and experimenting and trying things without, wrecking your business in the real world. So these are all value adds. I think one of the things that surprised all of us is that the cognitive abilities like creative thinking have improved. Like we always thought we could not teach someone creative thinking, but there's actually a way to do that. I think that's something that we've actually tapped into. So some of those squishy skills we always talked about, creative thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration, there actually may be a way to leverage some of these emerging technologies like we're doing with FutureView, like with the metaverse and AI, to actually unlock that potential in people. And I think that's one of those things that, one, it's a powerful asset for organizations, but two, there's a lot of natural resistance built up because we've never been able to do this before with other, traditional, call it processes or approaches. It's people feel like it's suspect because we've never been able to do it in 200,000 years of human history. We feel like we could never do it. But I think one thing we've learned is that black swan type of events, just because we've never been able to do it before doesn't mean it's not possible. And that's I think one of the barriers we can overcome.
We all live twice as long as we did 120 years ago. And we didn't, it's the reasons for that are really kind of simple. Antibiotics, good nutrition, sanitation. That's how I feel about all of this stuff. FutureView, AI, what Neil's doing with some of the big problems that the UN is looking at it's kind of obvious when you look at it. And I think in 50 years we're going to go, well, boy, people were idiots not to see this before. This is kind of self-evident that there's a way to do this. And just like we never sent the mechanics at New York City Transit to computer school to learn a complex computer system, we're not going to send people to AI school to amplify their already existing expertise with a little high energy intern, that happens to be a computer. I mean, AI school is kind of stupid,
Yeah. So
my 90-year-old parents were using Google. I thought, I really should pay attention to this. They didn't need to go to school for this.
I think I really appreciate having this conversation because it's very pragmatic and very grounded. There's none of the highfalutin stuff that I've tried to blot out from the mainstream, coverage of AI, as one does. I'm sure during the 99 .com bubble, there was a lot of highfalutin stuff said about the internet as well. And, it's changed our lives, but not in ways that people originally thought, perhaps. We've got 15 minutes left. I just want to have a grab bag of random questions. And I just wanted to go through them quickly. The first one is, what should human expertise researchers learn from AI researchers? Lia.
Now you're drilling close to the nerve here.
Oh dear.
I as you know, some of my colleagues don't think AI should be used. It should be regulated, and they think it is a threat to expertise. I don't think it is. I remember in the 90s, there was a lot of debate when I was a professor about should ordinary people have the internet. I had the internet since the early 80s. I was doing email, and I was doing, communicating with people all over the world on a VAX system, right? And, they were like, scary fairy, we can't let ordinary people have the internet because bad things might happen to them. It's very similar to AI now. We could, all that happened with the internet being available to everybody is it improved. I think the same thing with experts using AI. I think if we let everybody have AI, people will figure out how to become more expert at what they do by having what Neil calls these high energy interns. They will elevate their own thinking. And, that's my opinion. And I think we should be studying that instead of trying to stop it. Who uses AI well? What is high AIQ look like? Let's try to understand that, and let's try to bring that forward to everybody.
It's a very politically correct answer. Very good answer.
Well, we'll see what happens to me after this rush. Who calls me out? But some of them are not even on social media,
okay, so
they may never see this.
The flip side, let's ask the flip question, and this could be for both of you. What do you think AI researchers and AI practitioners, right, at the cutting edge, should learn from the people who study human expertise?
I mean, I'll jump in, and I think it's just the honest truth is understanding how things work. One thing that Gen AI has shown us, in all honesty, is that a lot of people that do the work don't understand all the parameters that go into it. So I got a very good friend, LJ Rich, very accomplished musician, developed an AI system very early on, recognizing it. But you talk about like generating music, right? We have some of these simple tools, some of these things, but her prompts, right? She's classically trained in music. Her prompts are over 500 words long. She's talking about like what notes she wants to use, what melody, chords, what rhythm, what style, and she could experiment with that kind of stuff and change it up, but she understands what goes into music. That's why she's able to take really effective use of this. Whereas, a lot of other people, they're thinking, I hate to say it this way, like the AI understands certain things and they expect it just knows like music or something, and as a result they have very generic prompts. And so they see output that as a result is generic or it's hallucinating. So, we've heard, at least in the United States, a lot of lawyers, this has happened 30 or 40 times now, where they're using like ChatGPT for legal research. And they have these great cases to cite, but the opposing attorney and the judge can't find them. It turns out, ChatGPT made it up. And I talked to some of these lawyers. Right? Should they have done their verification on it? Absolutely, right? But people tend to trust what machines tell you because they don't make mistakes, air quote here. But one of the big challenges talking to them is when they're asking for these cases, they're going to like, hey, give me 2 or 3 cases I can cite in court that support my case strategy, right? Well, the ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever you're using doesn't realize those have to be real cases. right? As humans, we intuitively understand that. The AI does not understand that. So as a result, it's creating like these perfect cases that greatly support your case. Again, shame on them for not double checking that. But if you change your prompt, and you can try this, you change the prompt and say, please research and identify 2 or 3, real case studies or real cases that help support my legal argument, you get very different output. And to us as people, we think like, well, that's crazy. Well, I have to say these have to be real cases. Well, the AI doesn't know that. And so it's not like the AI just making stuff up. It did exactly what you asked for. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people and businesses need to reconcile is that AI thinks differently than we do as humans. So that's why I always say when you work like Gen AI, it's like talking to your great grandmother. You have to be very slow and explicit what you're looking for. You don't believe me, I'll tell you, the audience, try using one of these tools to write your bio, right? And most people will say, like, my name is so-and-so, write a bio for me. Like, get something that's sort of spot on, or if you have a generic name, a little off. So you learn, okay, I'll add my employer, or my job title, or college I went to, something like that. Helps refine it. But you think about what writes a good bio, you might want to say, like, use the active voice. I'm going out and talking to a group of financial people, so emphasize my financial experience, right? There's all these other parameters you need to put in to get a better draft output. We just, unfortunately, don't recognize that. We expect the AI just to intuitively understand some things that we're not directly telling it. So the more information we give the AI, the better. This is one of the challenges that we face is, right, we're used to talking to people. We are used to get talking to AI.
And I think people who develop AI systems need to know that they develop AI systems. So their standard of what's a successful product is very different than a user's. I kind of learned this early on with developing FutureView. Every time we onboard a new developer, I have them work on a client. They're not working alone. They're not learning the code without having to work with a client. Because when you're working with a user, you design very differently. And I think if there's any advice to AI companies, they should do all their design with users.
All right. Final 10 minutes. I want to give both of you an opportunity to talk about what you're working on. So, Lia, right before the call, we were just talking about how ACSILabs was just put into the STP transition marketplace.
Yeah.
And maybe you could talk a little about that.
Well, our goal is, and you know this from talking to me before, I think accelerated learning belongs to everybody. We used it for years to make rich people richer and elite people more elite. We all have the same neurophysiological mechanisms. We can all learn faster. We can all be innovative. I think Neil's been saying that. I think FutureView belongs to the world. I think accelerated learning belongs to the world. And the FutureView platform is one of many ways to give people that opportunity. I hope in the future it's not the only way, but it's a start. And being in the transition marketplace makes it something people can have. And they can have it easily. It's approved as a sole source, unique technology now. The government has invested millions in it. And our goal is to make it more available. And the marketplace is one way to do that. Make it easy for people to buy a license.
Just to clarify, the marketplace, is it only for government primes or is it for anyone?
It's for, actually, one of the warnings they told us is even the Chinese can access the marketplace. So be aware who your buyers are. Yeah, apparently it's not that the Chinese are bad, but that we, just because we are approached by somebody who has access to the marketplace doesn't mean we shouldn't be cautious. So The advantage of the marketplace is your product is in there forever. You still own your IP, and you've got sole source status, and people who either buy from the government or for the government or who are affiliated, like Boeing, they don't have to go through this long competitive bid process to access our technology. So it's very exciting for us. We would like in a year or two to be huge in terms of the spread of this opportunity for people.
Neil, would you like to talk a little about your work with ACSILabs, also a bit about your work with AI for Good?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, one of the things we're really focused on is that we know that there's a better way of just teaching people, pure and simple. You know, the truth is, a lot of the education, a lot of training we do is still rooted in 19th century techniques. We know there's a better way of wiring the brain. So when we talk about all these things, and you hear people talking about, well, I'm using AI for education, or we're using VR for education. A lot of what they're doing is automating the existing learning models, right? So they're automating the flaws with those models. You just know there's a better way of wiring the brain. And that's what we're really focused on with FutureView. There's a better way of wiring the brain and teaching people, helping them to, clone expertise, accelerate learning, learn like creative thinking. Just that we don't think about the cognitive science behind it. That's the real secret sauce. And that's the power that we actually are tapping into. And so when you think about some of these large, complex problems, like in the UN, the number 2 initiative is actually climate change. What can we do about that? And that's not just about like, okay, how do we reduce carbon emissions? Or just like a lot of this requires how do we help people understand what their behavior is, how they contribute to that. How micro actions in particular can help. Because if I tell everyone right now in your audience, Cedric, you go out and adopt a house plant, right? You're going to help fight climate change. They'll be like, yeah, great. Yeah, thanks, Neil. I'm one person. How much difference is that going to make, right? The thing is, if you do that, you help share that story with other people, right? And 1,000 people hear me say this and do it, and they go out and tell, and each one of those people gets another 10 people to do it, it amplifies. And in the aggregate, those micro actions actually add up. And that moves the needle. We've seen that in the UN with the SDGs. And that's one of the things we're trying to tap into AI is not just, okay, some of these solutions and how we can grow more food, provide better health care, improve access to, key resources like sanitation and clean water. It's also trying to help people understand how their behaviors, even the small things we do in every day, can positively or negatively impact. Understand that if you do something that's good, it's not just you, it's 100 million people that are doing that. And I think it's the real power we have with AI is to be able to showcase that footprint and show how every decision you make, what the ramifications, the outcome, the ripple effect is. And that's one of the things with FutureView. When you do things, it's all decision driven, right? You do something, that's the cognitive science, you can see what that effect and ripple effect actually is.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Lia. Neil, if people want to find ACSILabs, where can they go?
Well, they can go to the website, acsilabs.org, and we're in San Diego, but we have partners all over the world. So the best thing to do is just go to the website and contact us with the contact sheet. And, both Neil and I can be reached that way. And we have obviously our emails.
Thank you very much for your time. I felt like I learned a lot.
Oh, good. Well, this was really fun. I don't know how you feel, Neil, but I always like talking to Cedric.
It's a fantastic conversation, and hopefully this was useful for your audience, Cedric.
Yeah.
I think it is. It was definitely useful for me.